Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about building the resilient leader in you. Today, we're going to be talking about virtual conferences. With more and more companies moving their largest and most important gatherings online, learning how to host a powerful virtual conference can make all the difference. Our guest today is here to help us unlock the secrets of making your virtual conference a success. After our conversation, there'll be grounds for thought, and we'll present further insights. So stay tuned to see what is brewing. I was invited to speak at a virtual conference on storytelling. I was happy to return to a topic that I love. I have to confess, I don't always enjoy being a speaker at a conference. For example, you spend a lot of time preparing for it, and the best introduction that you get is this cavalier introduction from the host. And the audience doesn't know really why you've been invited, or the session is so poorly organized you can't see your own slides, and you can only hope that the audience is looking at the same thing you are. This time, I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. Virtual conferences are essential today and most helpful to bring people into the conversation from parts of the world that don't normally have access. It's a special conference that can hold your attention when you're not trapped sitting in the middle seat on the row and can't leave. You can get up from your computer anytime, and you can do whatever you wish, including email. But this time, I actually stayed online for hours to watch the other presenters, something I almost never do. True confessions. No, it's something I never do until this particular conference. And that brings me to our guest today, the leader of this conference, who made the experience exceptional, Artem Mushin-Makedonskiy. Artem is the founder of Historia Academy, a Russian-based story consulting company, board member at the Storytelling and Organizations Interest Group of the National Storytelling Network here in the U.S., recipient of the Oracle International Story Bridge Award for his contribution to the global storytelling community. He's host of 5 international online conferences about storytelling and narrative practices from 2020 till 2024. And he is author of Narrative Leadership, The Art of Engaging and Persuading Through Story. Let me introduce you more directly with Artem. Welcome to Unlocked, Artem.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure and such a warm introduction.
Good. I'm glad. Well, from 2000, working with a group called Golden Fleece, I put on an annual international conference on storytelling and business for 10 years running. The conference was in Washington, D.C., and brought together many of the leaders in what at that time was a brand new subject area. I mean, in 2000, no one talked about storytelling as something that related to business. And someday I'll tell that story, but not today. Putting on that conference was a real challenge. I mean, you had to make it happen, from getting the best speakers, to finding a venue that the conference could afford, to filling the seats with an audience. I see you nodding your head, Artem. Putting on virtual conferences face the same challenges. Mine was face-to-face, but virtual is different. So, Artem, let's begin by describing your conference to the audience. How long has it been running? How's it structured? How many registrants do you have? You know the drill.
No, of course. But first of all, let me tell you, 10 years in offline is just something else. It's an honor to be talking to a person who's been doing this and doing story work for so many years and being so generous in sharing it. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So the conference we've been hosting has been running for 5 years, and it's been an online gathering running from 3 to 5 days, depending on the year. Every year we pick a different topic, which we focus on and explore through stories For example, we had one on storytelling and leadership, another in storytelling and corporate culture, etc., etc. And we have around 28 to 35 speakers, again, depending on the number of days. Each of them presents for a couple of minutes and then does a Q&A, and that's it. So it's just a gathering of people, just like you said, who've been doing work in story field, and they've been sharing knowledge on different subject matters.
Now, you said a couple of minutes. What you mean by a couple of minutes is like 30 minutes.
Yeah. It's most typically it's 30 minutes a talk, then 10 minutes a Q&A, and then we switch to the next speaker. We had some different formats, like workshop, which is a bit longer, like 1.5 hours or 2 hours. But mostly it's 40 minutes and 30-10 spread inside of them. Yeah.
Okay. So how many registrants have you had over the years?
So it's difficult to tell you like the absolute number, because we had some people coming again and again and again. And I even had this girl posting that her favorite conference is coming back online this year. But most typically we have around like 16 or 1,700 people registering. It's been less some years. We had top like I guess 2,500 people. That was the maximum, and I would say that it's around this number in the middle somewhere.
Okay, respectable, I would say.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You know, of course, I remember my beginnings in story and why I actually chose it, but I'm really curious, before we go any further, what made you decide to work in story?
Well, actually, it's been. I had like two ways into it. First of all, I've been right after getting my psychology degree, I was working in employee engagement field, which was my diploma study. And there I realized that you cannot affect engagement directly, but if you set up different things around employees, like a good team, credible job, resources, career, etc., then the engagement suddenly happens. And at the same time, while I was getting like my brain into consulting and HR, etc., my wife, who is actually behind supporting me with these conference big time, and then if we get there tonight, she's been interested in going further into academic studies. So in her master's degree, she got acquainted with narrative psychotherapy. And she was really vocal about how it heals people, you know the drill. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be the first person ever to realize that this is applicable to business. And then I opened up Amazon and I was like, no, you're not. Lots of books published, so get in line. And I'm like, okay, but it was so thrilling to find this key. I would say this show overall, it really fits my view towards storytelling, because for me, story is the way to unlock the engagement of people more directly than anything else. So that's the short answer to it.
I love that short answer because, first of all, it's the name of my show is Unlocked. and I use story a great deal to help people unlock their resilience. And it's fascinating that one of the first things, especially when working with a young person, they're nervous about something coming up. And I said, okay, tell me a story about a time when you overcame a real problem. And they start telling you about it. And all of a sudden you can see in their own eyes, they can see something new about themselves. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Yeah. It's a powerful, powerful medium. We could talk about this all day, but we did talk about conferences. So, well, maybe one more thing. One of the things you do with your clients is you use storytelling when you do your culture work, you call it. I'd like you to talk a little bit about this, because to me, it was one of the, one of the ways I justified my work in running the conference on storytelling so many years ago. You don't change culture without providing models and knowledge about the models. And a conference offers both those things. So talk a little bit about, in addition to your work at conferences, about how you use story and culture work.
Oh, that's a great connection. And to be honest, my storytelling conference thing is not like the main thing I do. It's every year, it's pro bono. I don't get anything out of it. I just pour the resources to translate, to host
I can
platforms.
understand.
Yeah, so there's literally nothing I gain from it. But what I really adore is that people from this conference, they get an idea that story can be applicable. Like this one time, I had this HR come to me and say, "Well, our team grew like double the size, and we need to preserve our unique culture, like values and mission statement." And I was like already into explaining how story is a great tool for doing it, and she was like, Artem, save it for somebody else. We've been to the conference. Let's work. So for me, and this is just one instance, but for me, this is justified big time because just like you've mentioned, as soon as people realize story is applicable to their business, they get it 100%. And as for the culture work, the things that we need to unlock in the organizations, in my opinion, which again resonates deeply with your show and the episodes I've watched, which really engaged me, is two things. First, unlocking the power of why do I come to this job? Not what do I want to get out of it, but what's the reason keeping me up at night, thinking about going to the office in the morning and doing something meaningful. And that's the thing that can be unlocked through stories, through the simple moments. Like, tell me about a time when leaving the office, you thought to yourself, man, like days like this, they make me work my best self and bring my best self to work. Just, even for free. And the second thing is, which I like about culture work, is working with values. Because most typically, organizations face it like, okay, values is a set of rules. How do I behave? But stories can make it a dialogue about why do we need to behave in this way. And
Mm.
again, just telling a simple episode when you are proud of an employee who didn't have to do the things he did, but you are really proud he did them because that's what keeps the company running. That's the dialogue on stories and values instantly happening in the company.
As you were describing that, I was thinking of a session I ran recently with a group of executives. It's a leadership breakfast, and I wanted to talk to them about future story because
Mm.
leaders often are thinking about they have to say the vision. Oh, what's that? There, let me take that off. They have to talk about the vision. Well, what does the vision mean if it isn't a story that captivates the listener, right? So I put them through an exercise, and they ended up within less than an hour. They had constructed a future story from their own stories, because I always begin with stories from the past, right? And you could, I mean, literally, you could read the story and you go, that's Linda's thing. That's John's. You could really see them. And when you can see yourself in that future story, wow, because it pulls you. It's just like the man who leaves the work or the woman who leaves the work that day saying, oh, yeah, this is why I come to this work. That's what that does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh,
Absolutely.
love it. Love the example.
Oh, well, okay. Now, here's the next question, which I think you may have begun to answer. What made you decide to head up this conference? I mean, it's a lot of detail. I know that. I mean, you've got to keep track of many people. You've got to keep track of different functions. You have to enlist people and convince them that they're going to give you time just pro bono. So, why did you do it?
Well, to be like totally honest, it was at first an automatic decision. So let me be brief here. After I read like 6 or 7 books that were published in Russian on storytelling and business, I was like, that's not enough. I need to go further. And I started reading English books, but then I thought that's not enough too. So out of the blue, I got this idea. Why don't I, as a manager who just leads soft skills training in a bank, which I was at the time, I thought, why don't I email these people and ask them for an interview? And suddenly, all those mega minds answered with yes. And I was like, wait, is this even legal? I still remember to this day, I met Paul Smith, who is a fascinating author,
Lovely
leading the
man.
story.
Lovely man.
I can see his book on your shelf there. So Paul comes up in an email. He says, if you want an answer to this question, just go to this page in my book. And I was like, yeah, so here's what I found on this page, but I still have this question and this question. And he's like, okay, let's do an interview. So he comes up, perfect lighting, perfect headset, microphone. He was like, oh, Artem, welcome. And I'm at Starbucks with music, Wi-Fi turning down. And I'm like, Paul, so lovely to see you. And that was my first interview. Till this day, it still has like 100 views on YouTube. But Paul was really vocal about, like, yeah, why don't we do it? And after like 6 or 7 months, I was faced with my partner, who we did a couple of online courses with, just, nothing serious. He said, I'm doing a series of online conferences on different topics. Why don't we do one on storytelling if you provide the speakers? And I'm like, okay, I'm trying. I'll try. And again, these people just agreed. And we did one, and I was like, why don't I do it again? And then again, and then again. And it just became a practice. But after 2022, it really changed for me, because in the first years, I was like, okay, I'm going to think long and hard of how can I show people in business that story is applicable. In 2022, it all changed, because I felt that I'm in the right place in the right time to do story conferences that matter more than to business. And that's why the last two topics were Stories Without Borders, right after we experienced the nightmare of 2022. And then the last one is Stories Like Now, which is not only about business itself. So that's been the journey. The meaning was created along the journey. It was automatic in the beginning.
That's called emergent.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you followed what was logical, or maybe not even logical, but you just followed it because the path was clear.
Yeah.
I love it, Artem. I knew I would find fascinating things by talking to you. And by the way, Paul Smith is a delightful person. He's a grand person. I'm so glad you started with him. Yeah, yeah. Wow. All right. So now we know why you headed it up. You just sort of fell into it.
Yeah.
Maybe we could say you walked into it, because you did a lot of it. Now, once you've decided, and this I'd like you to answer for yourself, and then maybe speculate for others. How did you measure success for what you did? And how can other people use that to guide what they do?
Okay. So this is the hard part, to be honest. Since we're not doing it for any money, we don't use any kind of serious metrics in terms of, participation rates or engagement rate, etc., like the normal people would use when they do paid events. For me, it was more about the community. So first thing I'm really attentive to is what people say changed in their lives after the conference. And I gather these micro stories from companies or from people. I always ask, like, how did you learn about my thing that you're asking me about, or storytelling per se, not even connected to me. And when people say something like, "Oh yeah, we learned it at one conference," that's a phrase I actually love. We learned about it at one conference we were at, and they don't even mention me. For me, that's just that's pure gold, because that's something that exists outside of my zone of control. That's one. And the second thing is the rate of participants coming back, joining one more year, and sharing the conference, like information about the conference in their social media. So we had this girl who has been following us for like 3 years, and since that time she has been like only the participant, then a participant and a very vocal participant, and then she has been sending an all staff email across her company with invitation to other people. So it's those people who have been, the free radicals that are shifting this talk from storytelling what to storytelling wow inside their social groups. But I really don't know how to properly measure this. I mean, there should be some metrics. That's true. And, coming to your question, I would really advise to be more serious than I am in terms of measuring the success and measuring the distance traveled, and seeing how many people log in again, seeing how many people bring their friends, like using the UTM metrics, etc. That's a great way to do it. I would say that I'm too passionate to be that structured. That's a non-essential.
I, I like that. I think I'm going to use that phrase. I'm too passionate to be. That's a great line. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. And the interesting thing is, as you were talking about the fact that you don't measure, you were really talking about impact. And and I remember when we were doing major projects, for example, at the World Bank. Yes, you could talk about all the money that you put into the thing and how many resources and how much time it took and how many people were participants in the countries. But in the end, what you really wanted was impact. And even in my work today, I still want to have impact. And so what you're describing is very real in terms of measuring success because it's the ultimate. Okay. Uh, I want to also then spend some time uh, talking about how you do select the speakers. I mean, it's in the beginning you may have just fallen into the right group, but that doesn't last forever. You have to. I know that you have to keep poking around and finding really good speakers. So, what's your approach to finding good speakers?
Mhm. So my first idea was that some people do storytelling, some people do public speaking and talk about storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
and some people do story work. So I was always aiming for the first and the third group because the most vocal people, in my experience, that's just my view, are the people who do public speaking training or prepare people to present something, and they call themselves storytellers. But that's not the depth I'm looking forward to. So people who work in story, not attached to public speaking, and people who work with story, not related to storytelling, but related to story listening, story crafting, story gathering. That's the people who I'm looking forward to finding, and they're really relatively easy to find, or at least I'm that lucky. Because first of all, a lot of books that if you stumble on one book of a practitioner, there are like lots of links to practitioners from different countries. The first time I saw a mention of yourself was in David Hutchins's book, The Circle of Nine Muses,
Yeah.
and you were mentioned there in terms of like several exercises, and I was like, oh my god, that's so deep. I need to get in touch. But the rest is really technical. It's just finding a way to approach website, email, LinkedIn, whatever, wherever you find the person. Or sometimes, and that's a thing I've been using for, well, the last, I guess, couple of years, I've been emailing the person who has been a participant of the conference because I know that he might or she might have something relevant. For example, we had Jeff Mead, who was talking about um, becoming more conscious about your narrative and how you tell it from different perspectives and how you listen to stories from different perspectives. And I emailed Jeff, like everyone else, and I asked, who in your mind resonates with this topic? And I then described the topic of the conference, the key metaphor, the key areas I wanted to explore. And like that, I got like 10 or 12 recommendations this year alone, even if people were absent because they have other work to do. I followed the recommendations and that worked out.
Okay. It's actually a very good strategy. It's going to, excuse me, it's going to people who already have shown evidence that they have knowledge, and then you just go and you tap it.
Of course.
All right. Now, one of the things that I discovered in working with you as a speaker on your conference was that it was a pleasure to do it. I got what I needed when I needed it. You even reminded me of things gently, always. uh, how did you feel about that that role as the nurturer of your speakers, and what were some purposeful things that you put in place?
Okay. That's a difficult one because people might not really appreciate my reply. But here's the deal. I do this conference, and what I care like 99% of the time is not the participants. I really don't care who comes to the audience, how long do they stay, or even what connection do they experience at times, as much as I care for the speakers, for how structured it is, for how easy it is to process. That's why I take like the extra time to just map it out in terms of I take a calendar out and I just draw it out. When should I send an email with the request for this information? What email should I send a day before, an hour before? How do I thank the person? And I just get it all planned out. I don't do a percent of this work in terms of marketing. I do a lot of marketing in terms of talking about the conference and recommending, but that's just a fraction of the work I put in compared to the speakers. Because I believe there's this phrase I like that was gifted to me by a partner of mine who we actually work on culture with. She says that whatever you do towards the employees, they will give. No, it doesn't go like this. Whatever service you want your employees to provide to the conference, you need to give your employees twice that much in terms of care. So it just halves. So that's my idea. And the three key things I do that for in terms of for the speakers is, first, I'm really clear about the goals of the conference. I'm clear about like why do it, what's the intention behind it, what's the key metaphor. I'm really clear about why do I invite this specific person. For example, we had this guy called Ralph Weichel. He's great in terms of appreciative inquiry and appreciative leadership. I did it like I just copied and pasted a fraction of a book by David Cooperrider on appreciative inquiry. And I was like, Ralph, that's why you're linked to this conference for me. So it's a personal touch. And then third, it's really, really structured process. So I get a lot of tasks on, like I write them out in Trello and just log everything. So my January through May just looks like 50% of effort I do in the working hours is conference work with speakers. 10% is participants. 40% is the rest of the work I have in consulting and hosting workshops, outside of the conference.
Now I know why it was such a success. No, I mean that very sincerely, because what you did was you found the right content and you focused on the content and the content providers. Because I did feel very cared for, and that was important, because I had just come from another conference where I was not cared for at all.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, it was dreadful, and I basically, they're off my list now. I don't care what they ask for.
I'm with you.
I love to share what I know with people. It doesn't. I never hold back what I know. But there has to be a sense of, I'll call it respect, that you've been asked to do something and provide it, and you don't have to be. It doesn't have to be obsequious. It just has to be respectful. So I applaud you on that. There was another aspect to this, and I think it's a natural outcome from what you just said. During the conference, you were very present, and hosts are not often present throughout the conference. I've known hosts who just, push the button and go off and do other things, and you can tell it. But for you, you didn't do that. How did you? I guess you just blocked out those 3 days, huh?
Yeah, that's the short answer is yeah. I don't see any reason for doing it otherwise, because for me, it's a great way to educate myself. And even to be honest, I still re-listen to most of the talks, because it's really hard to stay in terms of focused on the content, because I need to, send the short messages like you can choose the language in the lower left corner to the chat. I need to respond like to technical emails, to check the next speaker. I just need to be present, but I'm not fully focused on the content.
Yeah.
But I would say that it's really an opportunity you create for yourself too. I mean, it's really an eye-opening, lots of eye-opening moments that happen even after like 5 years. I know 5 years of any kind of work, story work included, is not long, but 5 years is enough to start thinking, well, I know enough, I can teach people. That conference, every year, it proves to me, Artem, you're so sweet, you don't know nothing, you're like Jon Snow.
Well, I think I wrote in one of my books, the more knowledge you know, it's sort of like walking around the edges of your knowledge. And the edges get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you just become aware.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what are some common mistakes that you see people? Because obviously you must participate in some other conferences. What are some common mistakes that you see?
To be totally honest, I don't like participating in a lot because I'm a provider of education for like grown-ups. So I mostly work, and there are a couple of conferences I visit as a participant, and they tend to be organized really neatly. But there are, I guess, three things that really, make me triggered. First one is some conferences forget about filtering out the level of participants. It's really hard to listen to somebody like yourself talking about story and quantum physics, which is a really deep connection through very neatly selected examples, that was on point. I mean, I believe, I mean it. And if the next person would be talking about a story, you need to have a conflict and the resolution, I mean, that would just spoil everything. That's like, tasting, I don't know, some caviar and then going for McDonald's. I don't know, hate McDonald's, but just to be clear, I would never mix the two. So it has to be something delightful. That's one. Secondly, is the lack of meaning making between the session, which for me, that's the best part of being a host. It's just this person is somebody who's like, he's letting the conference get inside himself, and you're actively participating in it, and you just get the meaning you get from it to the participants. So through you, they get the idea of something bigger than just the content. So it's not that I get the content to a next level. I wouldn't say so, but this reflection prompts them to reflect, and that's actually a part where while at this conference we had Sarah Silvernoyen. We were doing an interview, and one of the people in the chat wrote literally, wow, I didn't even think I could ask such a question to somebody. So the person is not thinking about the content of the conference. He's, I'm transmitting a way of, hosting it. Even I'm not focused on doing so.
Yeah.
And the last thing is, so focus on like level of content, then reflection. And the last thing is quality, of course. So quality of connection. It has to be organized. Quality of order in terms of, all the emails should go out in person, etc. There is a lack of it in the conferences I visit. Not as much as the first 2 points, but sometimes speakers are not treated like the stars. The participants are treated like the most meaningful part of the audience, because it would seem that participants are bringing business to somebody who's speaking. So it's in the educational market, at least. For me, the stars are the ones talking, and the rest are just people lucky to be there. I don't know. I don't want to harm anyone with these harsh words, but that's how I view it.
I really appreciate that perspective. You're right about finding speakers that are close enough in level of sophistication so that when the audience comes in, they don't suddenly discover one that is elementary, accidentally, maybe I'll call it, because then they feel like they're wasting time.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good. I love the fact that you did reflection during the conference. That's a hard thing to do. In fact, it's one of the things that had hoped to incorporate in this show, and I can't do it in the time frame of the show. In other words, I can't instantly move from the interview into the reflection. So that's why I've introduced Grounds for Thought, which is a separate segment, which I can then edit back into the show, because then it gives me time to do some reflections.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it took me a long time. You know, when you're doing something new for you, I had never done television like this. I've done many interviews. My goodness, I spent my career doing interviews, but to do it this way, you had to figure out how you could improve things. And this last point of quality of order, there was at one conference I was invited to. It was a virtual one, and I did not have an opportunity to even test to see if the technology was working with them. When I was in the session, I couldn't see my slides. All I could see were the backs of people's heads in the audience. That's all I could see from my vantage point. Yeah. And
That's just no comment. Or I would swear, but I would prefer no comment.
right. So I have, there no, and I have got no feedback. So, yeah, quality of order. Excellent points. Excellent points. Well, I can't believe how much we have covered. But you know what? The cool thing is we still have more time. And
Awesome.
I'm curious. I know that you did not have, no, I take it back. You did have Q&A sessions. So everybody gave about 30 minutes, and then they went into a Q&A time. And I assume that Q&A was always through the chat. And you brought those questions forward. and I have to confess to the audience that I was very hard on Artem, because I insisted upon sending mine in as a video, pre-recorded, because I had such bad experience in the past. So I made him live with me on a recording. But then I came on live for the Q&A time. So I did honor that for you. And I really appreciated that.
Thank you. I appreciate
it. Your willingness to comply to what I needed. But that's consistent with what you were saying. But let's come back to Q&A and how did you, no, let me say it differently. What's the role of interaction with the content immediately from the audience? And of course, you did your reflection times, but talk a little bit about getting interaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's a good question. I would say that the key idea is actually story-based. So some questions from the audience are asked from a perspective of, no, let me put it differently. So any speaker who is talking with any kind of content is somebody who has lived through some stuff in their lives, maybe books, maybe experiences, etc. And he has achieved this point in time where he or she believes the things he or she is saying. And well, for my conference at least, because people mean stuff they're saying there. And in the audience, there are some questions that are obviously coming from the different side of it. And some people have experienced the speaker for 30 minutes. And they ask questions from this side, from not living this kind of life for that long. And my key idea is to find the question that is far enough stretched in terms of this contrast between what the speaker believes to be true and what the other side of the continuum is. For example, we had that didn't happen this year. I guess it was a year ago or 2 years ago. So this woman was talking about storytelling and leadership. And she did a terrific talk in terms of how stories can be elicited from people. And then there are two questions to come up in the audience. First one is, So how do I elicit stories better? And the second one is, let me translate it real quick. So she said, what's the point of even bothering to elicit somebody's stories if their experience is irrelevant? So the second question is obviously further away from where the speaker stands. And that's interesting in terms of how is it possible for this person to connect with this faraway person and make it so the question gets its answer. Those are rare moments, but if we have a lot of questions, I always go for the questions that have the most tension between the speaker and the listener. That creates the more story momentum for change.
Fabulous. That's it. That's a gem of advice, I must say. And not everyone recognizes that. Yeah. Look for that question that has the most tension, because that's what's going to interest people listening and keep them there.
Exactly. That's why I like negative contents like, oh yeah, right, that company, they always talk talk good about themselves. And I'm like, there's an interesting comment in the chat. I never miss an opportunity to comment or to point the speaker to comment on it, because that's where the gold is.
Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, we're almost out of time, but I want to give you a chance to say a few more things to the audience, maybe your last words.
Yeah.
The top 3 pieces of advice, and don't forget to tell people how to get in touch with you.
Okay. So, top 3 pieces of advice to host the conference. First, think about the topic you want to inquire yourself into. Every year around December or November, I get hit by this idea. Wow, I want to explore how stories are related to blah, blah, blah. And that just, every year I have a feeling around May that, wow, that's the last conference I host. Man, I'm so tired. But then in November or December, it's like, oh my God, this is the best idea I've ever had. The last ones were, nah, this one's going to be great. So that's pure inquiry. If you believe that you already know everything about the topic, it would be hard to get to this point. Second thing is...
I want to interrupt you because I want you to talk about this year's theme. It was a theme that totally surprised me.
This year's theme was, and that's my second advice. This year's theme was Stories Light Now, which last year we got the metaphor of bridges and building bridges and connections. And one of the speakers wrote to me that he thought of me as a lighthouse. And instantly I was like, oh my God, that's a great metaphor to make another step. It's not better than bridges. It's not worse. It's just another really deep and rich metaphor. And I was like, oh my God, I need to hit home with this one. And I couldn't stick the theme to the metaphor because it just didn't connect. And that point, my wife, who has been every year, she's been saying that's the most important thing you do. Every year she's been supporting me. For example, this polo, this thing, oh, sorry, it's on the right side because it's mirrored for me. This thing, she has been doing this with her own arms. Like she did this sewing and gifted it to me so I could host the conference in it. For 3 days, I've been wearing this. And every year, and she was like, I have a poem to read to you. And she read me a poem which has the words, I cannot translate it beautifully right now because it's in Russian, but it was a woman asked a series of questions like, what will you do in the times of chaos? What will you do in the times of darkness? What will you do in the times of war? And the reply was, I will be light. In Russian, this phrase doesn't mean anything. You cannot be light in terms of Russian grammar. But it is so strong. I will be light. And I was like, oh my God, we need to be light now. Stories light now. Oh my God, I got it. So second advice, get the people who are so vocal about supporting yourself and who believe that this is the most important thing you do, that no matter how you feel about it, they believe that you need to do it. So I got my person. I'm lucky. I don't know how to get one for yourself. I was just lucky. Yeah. So we explored how stories help people light up the now and see more clearly through the darkness that surrounds us. And for me, it's this theme is a resonance to what is happening around me. Last year, I felt that the borders are closing and the walls are rising up, and I was like, "No, we're gonna build bridges." This year, I feel like there's more darkness than ever, and I'm like, "No, we're gonna light it up." I don't know where the world goes someday, but I hope someday we will host the conferences like Story doesn't have to do anything. Story can take a weekend or a day off. That would be amazing.
I don't know. So you just want to make sure that you don't have a third piece of advice, because I asked
Yeah,
you.
I do. It's really short. It's really a short one, if I may.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so the last piece of advice is look for the speakers who are really so generous that they are generous enough to experiment with the topic and invest themselves not into bringing something they have, but into being creative and making something up for the conference. And those are literally the best talks, because this video you made for us, which was really an experiment. We never had a video and then a live Q&A. That was an experiment. But the video, you connected the dots between the things in your show. That was unique. Now that's the talks that resonate so much with people, and I'm so glad that people among the speakers are experimenting, and I'm really clinging to people who are bold enough to bring some experiments to the conference.
And I have to tell you that I had never spoken on that topic before. That particular.
It didn't feel a bit as if you haven't.
And it's fascinating. I felt perfectly comfortable moving into a new arena. And so I don't know what you did, but it did give me that sense of comfort. It's just exactly what you said, to be creative, which I chose to be. So Artem, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I'm available mostly via email or via Telegram or WhatsApp. I do have like my nickname on different social media like Facebook. It's at Your Story Tell with one L. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, WhatsApp. It's literally anywhere. And on LinkedIn, it's Artem Mushin-Makedonskiy, just like it's written. Yeah, that's where you can connect with me.
Outstanding. Well, Artem, this has been such a pleasure talking with you. And I knew this would be a wonderful story when we got together to do it. So again, thank you for joining me on Unlocked.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. As I considered what does and doesn't attract me to conferences, I became curious about current trends and what one should do about them. Here are 6 that I found. Design purpose-driven meetings. One significant shift is that conferences need a clear purpose. Younger generations in particular want to understand the why behind the actions, whether at work or at events. Second, make professional development a policy. The primary reason for attending conferences is professional development. Millennials, now the largest segment of the U.S. labor force at 35%, feel a sense of job uncertainty shaped by events like the recession and 9/11. General anxiety across all age groups adds to the need for assuring that time spent at a conference contributes to career development. Third, offer control over the agenda. Attendees desire more control over the agenda and session choices. In adult training, it's known that offering some level of control enhances learning, and this expectation now extends to conferences, connecting to the need for professional development. Fourth, utilize technological advancements. Technology is revolutionizing conference offerings, accommodating large virtual and hybrid audiences. Data shows that searches for hybrid event have surged by 309% in the past 5 years. That's from explodingtopics.com. Tech also allows real-time social media interactions, enhancing how a participant can control their engagement. Technology reduces costs and offers options for planning effective hybrid events. Fifth, combine business with leisure. Many participants now blend conferences with vacation or entertainment activities. This trend likely reflects our culture of long working hours and insufficient vacations, using conferences as a dual-purpose trip. Additionally, I think it eases feelings of guilt around taking time off. Conferences themselves can integrate leisure through entertainment and even diverse food offerings. Sixth, engage, engage, engage. Participants expect pre-event engagement, such as voting on topics, and post-event interactions. Live streaming with real-time interaction fosters ongoing engagement. Remarkably, these trends focus on enhancing participant experiences. What's often overlooked is the importance of presenter selection and care. Artem Mushin-Makedonskiy clearly understands that exceptional speakers expect respect for their contributions. When presenters feel valued, they bring more to their sessions, deeper insights, new information, and clear, impactful thoughts. This significantly enriches the overall conference experience. Moreover, focusing solely on attracting participants might lead to overlooking lesser-known but highly skilled presenters. My experience at Artem's conference demonstrated that every speaker's contribution was valuable. Explodingtopics.com notes that only 42% of virtual sessions attendees stay for the entire duration. 42%. Imagine if every presenter delivered their best. We could see a significant increase in this engagement, boosting ROI. While purpose and meaningful experiences are crucial, the role of skilled and motivated speakers is equally vital. They are not just part of the event. They are its focal points, inspiring and educating attendees. VFairs states, quote, "The demand for proficient presenters, moderators, and panelists surged across conferences, seminars, and virtual events. Companies and organizations keen on delivering impactful messages scoured the globe for individuals who could articulate complex ideas with clarity and passion. The bar was raised higher, leading to a competitive landscape where speakers were not just speakers. They were the architects of memorable event moments," unquote. I am still processing my thoughts on this and welcome your comments. Please post your comments on my YouTube channel, Madelyn Blair, or send me an email. I'll respond. And speaking of responding, do click the like button and subscribe. This simple act helps others find what they are looking for. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. And if you would like to explore a question or issue, go to my website, madelynblair.com, and schedule a free conversation. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.